He had taken the early flight home. Not because anything was wrong, because the meetings in Chicago had finished a day ahead of schedule, and he had been sitting in a hotel room at 9 in the evening, looking at his phone, and the last 3 photos on it were of his sons. And he had made the decision that people make when the distance between where they are and where they want to be becomes, for no particular reason, intolerable. He had texted nobody. He told himself it was because it was late. The truer reason was that he sometimes came home unannounced because it was the only way to see things as they actually were, rather than as they were prepared to be seen. He had built a company on the principle that the real condition of anything was visible only when no one knew you were looking. He had applied this principle to his household twice before. Both times everything had been fine. He pushed open the front door with his briefcase in his hand and stopped. The living room floor had become a tug of war. On one end of a rope, leaning back with her full body weight and laughing with the complete, unguarded, fully committed laugh of someone who is having the best possible time, was his housekeeper Adaiz. Her hair was slightly displaced. Her shoes were off. She was losing, which was not a close call. On the other end of the rope, pulling with the coordinated ferocity of 3 18-month-old boys who had discovered that together they were a force of nature and had not stopped field testing this discovery since, were his triplet sons, Noah, Eli, and Sam, all 3 in their matching airplane shirts, all 3 laughing with the full-body hilarity of toddlers who are winning something. Nobody had noticed him yet. He stood in the doorway of his own house with his briefcase in his hand, and watched the 3 most important people in his world lose their minds with happiness in the company of a woman who was supposed to be watching them and was instead playing tug-of-war with a rope he could not immediately identify the origin of, and losing on purpose with such total commitment to the performance that all 3 boys believed completely that they were beating her. He watched for 40 seconds. Then Noah looked up and said, "Dada." Everything stopped. Adaiz turned. She straightened. The laughing stopped. The rope went to the floor. Her expression shifted from the fully open face of someone caught in a real moment to the composed expression of someone recalibrating to a professional context. She said, "Mr. Cole, I did not know you were coming home." He said, "I can see that." A pause. He said, "Where did the rope come from?" She said, "The garage. They found it this morning. I tried to redirect them 4 times. By the 5th attempt, I decided to use it constructively." He looked at his 3 sons who were looking at him with the wide, assessing attention of toddlers processing new information. He said, "Were they winning?" She said, "They were winning comfortably." He said, "Were you letting them?" She said initially. By the end, they were actually pulling harder than I expected, Eli especially. He has very good grip strength for his age. He looked at Eli. Eli looked at him. Eli picked the rope back up and held it out toward his father. "Before we continue, if you believe that the most important thing happening in any house is not the appearance of it but the life being lived inside it, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people today." His name was Marcus Cole. He was 42 years old, and he had founded a supply chain technology company at 28 that had grown in ways he had not fully anticipated, and had required from him, over the following 14 years, the majority of his waking hours and a significant portion of the hours that were supposed to be for sleeping. He had 3 sons who were 18 months old and identical in the way that made pediatric appointments complicated, and airplane travel a logistical event, and Saturday mornings the loudest thing he had experienced in a life that had included a great many loud things. Their mother, his wife Priya, had died 11 months ago. Not from the pregnancy, not from anything related to the boys, from a pulmonary embolism on a Wednesday afternoon that had arrived, without warning, and had taken her in the time it takes for the wrong thing to happen in the wrong place and nobody to be there to stop it. He had been in Singapore. He had landed at home to 3 8-month-old boys who needed everything and a grief that had no floor that he had been able to locate in the 11 months since. He had kept moving because the boys needed him to keep moving, and because keeping moving was the only instrument he had. Adaiz Okonkwo had arrived 3 weeks after Priya died, sent by an agency that his sister had contacted because his sister had looked at the situation and understood that what he needed was someone competent and consistent and present in that order. She was 36 years old, and she had a quality that Marcus had identified in the first week and had not found the right word for. Until the second, the word was inhabiting. She did not manage the house from a distance. She inhabited it. She was present in the rooms as though the rooms were worth being present in. She learned the boys not as a category but as individuals, which was something that even some family members had not managed at 11 months. She knew that Noah liked to be sung to during diaper changes, and that Eli would only sleep on his left side, and that Sam got overwhelmed before he got tired and needed quiet before he needed a nap, not after. She knew these things because she had paid attention from the first day and had never stopped. A kindness tale. Marcus sat down on the living room floor. This was not something he had planned. His briefcase was still in his hand when he sat down, and he set it behind him without looking at it, and Eli came to him immediately, and Noah came at a slight delay, and Sam came last, because Sam always needed a moment to assess a situation before committing to it, which was a quality Marcus recognized from Priya and thought about every time he saw it. All three were on him within 90 seconds. He sat on the floor of his house in his suit and held all three of his sons, and Adiezi stood at a respectful distance and waited to understand what the moment required from her. He looked at her over their heads. He said, "How long has the rope been in the rotation?" She said, 8 days. It started as something they dragged around and became something we played with together. I should have put it back in the garage, but they asked for it by pointing at the door and making very clear requests. He said they don't have words yet for most things. She said, they have sounds. The sounds are quite specific once you learn them. Sam's sound for the rope is different from his sound for the ball. They communicate very clearly. We just have to be paying attention. He said, and you are. She said, I am always paying attention. He looked at his sons. He said, how are they today? Actually, she said, actually. Noah had a hard morning. He was looking at the photo in the hallway, the one of your wife holding all three of them in the hospital, and he was quiet for a long time afterward. I sat with him. He came back to himself after about 20 minutes, but it was a hard 20 minutes. Marcus said nothing for a moment. He said he does that. She said, I know. I have started sitting near him when he goes quiet near that photo. Not talking. Just being there. He said, does it help? She said, I think so. He leans against me after a while. I think he needs to know someone is there even when someone cannot fix what he is feeling. Marcus looked at the hallway where the photograph was. He said, that is true for most of us. She said, yes, it is. Before we continue, Kindness Tales wants you to understand who Adaz was before this house and what had shaped her into the person who sat quietly beside a grieving 18-month-old near a photograph. She had grown up watching her mother, a woman named Ngozi, care for other people's children and other people's households with the same quality she brought to her own, which was the quality of someone who does not divide the world into things that matter and things that are just work. Everything was things that matter. The family you worked for mattered. The children you watched mattered. The house you maintained mattered not because it was valuable, but because people lived in it, and people were always the point. Ngozi had said this to Adaizi when she was 12, and Adaizi had thought about it ever since. She had come to this country at 27, with a child care qualification and a commitment to her own children, who were being raised by Ngozi during the weeks, and who Adaiz called every evening and saw every weekend, and who were the reason the work mattered, and the reason she did it with everything she had. There was a woman at the agency named Constance who had placed Adaiz in 3 positions over 5 years, and who had said to her after the second placement, I want you to know that every family you work with keeps calling me to ask if you are available when their situation changes. That is not something that happens with everyone. Adaiz had said, I just try to be useful. Constance had said, you are more than useful. You are present. There is a difference. Adaiz had thought about that also. Marcus said, I want to ask you something. She said, yes. He said, I have been thinking about the structure here, the arrangement. You are contracted through the agency for defined hours and defined responsibilities. That arrangement was set up by my sister in a crisis, and I have not revisited it. She said, it has worked. He said, "It has worked because you have made it work in ways that exceed what the contract describes. I want to revisit it properly. With your input. I want to know what you need to do this work sustainably and what would make it better and what is not working that you have been managing without telling me, because telling me was not part of the contract." She looked at him. She said, "That is an unusual conversation to have with an employer." He said, "I have 3 sons who are going to grow up in this house with your influence as a constant. That makes you more than an employee in terms of what the role actually is. The contract should reflect the reality." She said, "What is the reality?" He said, "The reality is that you sat beside my son for 20 minutes near a photograph of his mother because he needed someone to be there. That is not a line item in an agency contract. That is a person choosing to do the right thing in a moment that asked for it. I would like to work for a world where that person is treated accordingly." Adais was quiet for a moment. Sam had climbed into her lap while Marcus was talking, which was something Sam did when he had completed his assessment of a situation and decided it was safe, which was the highest rating he gave anything. She said, "I would like more flexibility on the days my own children have school events. I have missed 4 this year." He said, "That is correctable. What else?" She said, "I would like to be consulted when decisions are made about the boys' routines, not as an authority, as someone who knows them and whose observations might be useful." He said, "That is reasonable. What else?" She said, "I would like the salary reviewed. Not dramatically, fairly." He said, "Done." She said, "You agreed very quickly." He said, "It was a fair request. Fair requests should be agreed quickly." She looked at him. She said, "You are different from what I expected when I took this position." He said, "What did you expect?" She said, "Someone who managed from a distance, someone who checked the reports and asked the right questions and was satisfied with the answers without needing to know what was behind them." He said, "I have built a company by knowing what is behind the answers." She said, "But that is different from wanting to know who is behind the children." He said, "I am learning that the skills transfer." Sam made a sound from her lap that was specific and clear. Marcus said, "What does that one mean?" She said, "He wants the rope." He looked at the rope on the floor. He looked at his 3 sons. He took off his jacket and set it on the briefcase behind him. He picked up the rope. He said, "I've been told Eli has good grip strength." She said, "Exceptional." He said, "Let's see." He took one end. She took the other beside him. The 3 boys arranged themselves on their end with the serious collaborative purpose of a team that has been practicing this, Marcus said on 3. She said, "They don't know what 3 means yet." He said, on the count of them grabbing it. They grabbed it. The living room filled with the sound that it had been full of when he opened the door, which was the sound of 3 children laughing with their whole bodies at the full joy of winning something against people who love them enough to let them. He was losing within 30 seconds. He did not let go. That evening, after the boys were in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, and Daisy sat across from him with her own, because he had asked if she had a few minutes, and she had said yes. He said, "I have been thinking about what you said, about Noah and the photograph." She said yes. He said, "I have been doing the same thing he does, going quiet near it, not processing, just stopping." She said, "Grief does not move in a straight line." He said, "People keep telling me that." She said, "It will keep being true." He said, "How do you know?" She said, "I lost my father when I was 23. It was not the same as what you have lost. Nothing is ever exactly the same. But I know what it is to carry something that has no bottom." He said, "Does it get lighter?" She said, "It does not get lighter. You get stronger. Those feel the same from the inside, but they are different things." He said, "Priya would have been very good at this stage, the walking and the talking that's coming. She was so ready for it." She said, "Tell me something she was looking forward to." He said, "She had a list. She kept it on her phone. Things she wanted to do with them when they were old enough. The first one was tug of war. She had this idea about it, that it was the perfect game for triplets because everyone pulls together." Adais went very still. She said she had tug of war on the list. He said, "First item." She said nothing for a long moment. She said, "I found the rope in the garage. I did not look at what else was in there. I did not know." He said, "How could you have known?" She said, "I feel like I should have." He said, "You couldn't. But I want you to know that whatever brought you to that rope and those boys today, whatever instinct or experience or quality in you that looked at 3 children and a rope and decided to play, you gave them something she wanted them to have. Adais looked at her hands. She said quietly, I just thought they were having fun. He said, and so were you. She said, I was. He said, that is not nothing. That is actually everything. She looked up. He said, this house has been very serious for 11 months. What I came home to today was the first time I have walked through that door and heard that sound. She said, what sound? He said, the real one. The one that means everyone inside is actually all right. She said nothing. He said, thank you for that. She said, I was just playing tug of war. He said, I know. They sat with their tea in the kitchen of a house that had been quiet for a long time and was becoming something else, slowly and imperfectly, and in the way that real things become themselves, which is not all at once, but moment by moment and person by person, and sometimes by a rope found in a garage on a Tuesday morning by 3 boys who pointed at a door and made their needs very clear. If this story stayed with you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of quiet dedication, unexpected grace, and the people who show up completely for the lives they are trusted with. Because sometimes the most important thing that happens in a house is